So I think I came to a point where I can talk about this like openly. Hopefully, I won't cry. So we're just gonna let it rock out. So we're gonna talk about grief, specifically grief when you're young. Okay. So 2 years ago, my dad unexpectedly passed away, and I was so lost because I had never lost anyone close in my family like that. There was people on my dad's side of the family, they passed away. My dad would go to the funerals. My mom didn't really want like us to go to the funerals because she just didn't believe that kids should be around that. So I completely respected it. But I had never really lost anyone close to me. That was like a big shocker that like not only was it like someone in the family, but it was, my parent, someone who raised me. So it was very, very a whirlwind of emotions. I can't even really remember that week. It was a very blurry week. I feel like people who've lost someone know what week I'm talking about, where it's like you only have a week to really plan the funeral. And I just don't know how my mom did it. Like, my mom is super strong because in 7 days, it was like we found out, and it was like 7 days, I had to get everything together, had the funeral. I just don't remember really a lot about that week. I think Lauren London had an interview where she talked about grief brain, about like forgetting things, and like I literally feel like that's what happened to me. Like, I felt like I literally forgot like so much that happened, but it was like a really traumatic experience. I was at a college party the night he passed away. My family didn't want to tell me. My sister knew where I was. She knew I was at a party, and she told my family, and they were like, you know what? Let's just give Logan one last night of bliss because her life is going to change tomorrow. So that's how it went. I was at a party Friday night, and they drove up to my college campus apartment. It was like a huge shock that they were all at the door, but it didn't resonate with me for some reason. My sister called me saying, hey, open the door. I opened the door, and they were all at the door, but for some reason, it just didn't resonate. Like, why are they all at the door? Is something wrong? Like, I just thought, like, why the heck are they here? Very confused, but I was also half asleep. So, yeah, they sat me down, told me, you know, dad passed away, and I just, started breaking down. It was just such a blur because I had to pack like I guess enough clothes for a week. I remember my sister was trying to help me like pack all my clothes because I was just so distraught, and she drove my car back home because I was too distraught to even drive. I don't even know. It was just like a crazy behind experience. The crazier part was more like not showing up for class or work because obviously in that moment you're not thinking about, oh, I got a job to go to, and like my job called me like, oh, where are you? And I said my dad died, but I was like in shock at that point, so like I wasn't even really thinking. I had to email my professors, let them know. And it's so crazy how they only give you a week to grieve, and then you're just supposed to be back at work and back at class. Like, I remember I told my professor, and she was like, yeah, like, I'll give you a week. You can take the test a week later. Like, 7 days is gonna magically have me healed. But, I understand it wasn't her fault. It's more like, nursing school also is on like a tight timeline anyways. So I understood it, but it's just crazy. And even crazier that my professor, when I told her that my dad passed away, she tried to relate to me by saying, like, oh yeah, my dad passed away too. It still hurts to this day. She lost her dad when she was in her 50s. Now, I'm not saying, obviously, like, it doesn't really matter what age you lose a parent or even a loved one. Like, it's going to hurt. No one will ever know the difference, between losing someone at a young age versus losing them when they're like in their 80s. She tried to relate to me, and in my head, I'm just thinking, like, I am 20 years old. When I found out he passed away, I was like, he's not gonna see me graduate. He's not gonna walk me down the aisle. For her to try to relate to that, I understood why she was trying to relate. I understand she didn't mean anything by it, but in my head, I'm thinking, like, this girl does not know what I'm going through. It amazes me how I even graduated. Most people would have quit, first of all. Most people would have quit, dropped out of school, quit their job, and just like laid in their bed. But I literally had to get everything together in a week. And there was a lot of times where I would literally be in class or at work and just wanted to break down crying. But I couldn't because I was in public, so I would like suck it up. I wasn't never like that before. Like, my sister can share that story. Like, I was a very sensitive person. I was always crying. open with my emotions and crying out in public, but since my dad passed, it has never been the same. Like, I have learned to literally bottle up my emotions. I'm not proud of it, but that's just what happened. At the end of the day, business gotta get handled. So I'm here to really talk about death as a young adult, because I feel like people think when you're an older adult, if you lose your parents when they're 80, it's like still sad, but it's like, oh, they got to see all your milestones. Whereas like as a young adult, as young as 20, it's like, how do you navigate? I knew people who lost people when they were in high school. So it's like crazy. I couldn't have imagined having lost my dad in middle school or elementary school, So I think that's worse than what I'm going through. But, I just want to share my experience because I know there's people who are going through this. They're just not as vocal with it and they're not as open with it. So let's talk about my response. Everyone knows grief comes different phases. And let me just tell you, that's a load of crap. It's not like step 1 through 5, like you go through denial, sadness, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. Grief is like all over the place. Some days I was in denial and I didn't believe he was dead and I thought he was going to come back home. Other days I was mad at him because I was like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe you do this. Other times it had me like overthinking, like, oh, would it have made a difference if I would have known he was gonna die versus a sudden death? Like, I was going through it and I still am. Like, it's a lot of up and down as far as like the stages of grief. So let me just debunk that myth. It's not true. It's not a step 1 through 5 and then you're healed. I posted my dad's, like, announcing that my dad passed away on Instagram, really just so nobody would make that mistake of like bringing up my dad again. So I just wanted to let all my followers know, or let anyone who cared. And then obviously you'd have people swipe up and be like, oh, I'm here if you need anything, right? They would say that and then not reach out. And that really affected me. I shouldn't have took it personally because, most young adults, young people, we don't know how to deal with death because most of us don't have to. Most people, especially death of a parent. But I took it so harshly because people would say, I'm here if you need anything. It would be radio silence. It'd be like they're just saying it to be cute or saying it to send their condolences. But, in the midst of it, I took heavy offense to it. But looking back, it was more like, what else are they going to say, And even now, like, even when people that I follow or that I know lose loved ones, I still don't know what to say. Because even though that I had my experience with the death of my dad, I don't try to relate to other people's death experiences because I know it's all different and everyone grieves in different ways. So for me, I went through this angry rebel, I hate the world, I hate everyone era. And I feel so bad about it. I cut so many people off because of that. I just felt like nobody understood my life. Nobody understood what it took to really get up every morning and still push through, like, with grief. It's so hard. Obviously God has made me stronger for it and better for it. I was angry. I just hated everyone. I shut off from the world. And really it was one of those things where it's like, if you did anything wrong at that era, that stage of my life, you were cut out of my life. It was like no explanation needed. I regret it, but I understand why I felt how I felt, because before my dad died, I used to be this goofy girl, like friends with everyone. I used to call everyone my friend, and I went to all the parties and I was just outside doing everything. And losing a loved one really makes you realize who's really there for you. And that's really the realization I had, was like, wow, these so-called friends I thought I had, I don't really have. That was just a big lesson. It really doesn't take death to really learn that lesson of like who your real friends are. But for me, I was very naive and I just didn't really know. And it really took death for me to understand, like, okay, like, this is how it is. I definitely OD'd with it. I did cut off people I shouldn't have cut off. I did distance myself from people I shouldn't have distanced myself from. But it was a lot going on. I just didn't feel supported the way I needed to. Like, I didn't feel like people were showing up for me the way I needed to. But then again, closed mouths don't get fed, because that's really what happened. Like, I really wasn't communicating with the people around me like, okay, this is how I need you to show up for me. I just expected them to know. So, that's not something that you can expect people to know. Like, you're in that point of grief, your stage of grief. It's like you have to be mature to communicate and say, listen, I need you to check on me every day. I need you to hang out with me, distract me, like whatever. So death etiquette. People don't really have it. Doesn't really matter what age you are. no one ever knows the right thing to say. There's really nothing to say because you don't want to act like you can relate to what they're going through, but I would just advise, like, if you do know someone who's lost someone, just to check in on them. You don't have to overbearing and say, like, hey, how's it been since you lost this person? But, just kind of like worm your way, like, hey, you want to go get food? You want to watch a movie? Like, I would just say that. But honestly, like, everyone's different. Some people like to duck off and be completely alone. Others like to distract themselves. I feel like what I needed at the time was probably company and distraction because I am an overthinker already. So I think I was just too alone in my thoughts to be thinking about so much. It caused me to lose a lot of people in my life and grieve not only my dead father, but also grieve people who still had a heartbeat. Like, y'all don't know pain until it's like grieving someone that you know is dead is already a battle, but grieving people who are alive, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it because that is a struggle to know that someone is still breathing in your life, but y'all just don't talk anymore because things just ended badly. I have grieved so many people in my life who are still breathing. And I think people didn't understand, like, I was grieving my dad, yes, but I was also grieving friendships I thought I had, a relationship I thought I had. What really hurts or really hurt the worst is thinking that people can move on and live their lives without thinking about me. That was the biggest thing that caused me to be so sad because I was like, oh my gosh, like I lost my dad and like y'all are out here just living life. And, it's not their fault because they should live life like as they should. My pain doesn't necessarily have to be my friend's pain. I would like to say that I'm an empath. If my friends are going through something, I feel like I'm going through it. I feel just as sad, just as angry, whatever they need me to be. But it was a very terrible experience for me. But it was my experience. I have 4 other siblings and everyone grieves in different ways. My brother had to see my dad's dead body for him to believe that he was truly dead. For me, I didn't need to. I didn't see his body at the funeral. I didn't want to. There really wasn't anything that I needed to see to believe that he was gone. But, everyone dealt with it in different ways. I was the aggressive one. My sisters was very emotional and was just crying every chance she got. I mean, everyone's different. I was very hardcore and I just hated everyone. I know that this is going to help someone, and I know that I'm not the only one who went through this, but that is how I was for a good 6-7 months. After that, I kind of started to live life again as I got closer to God, and that's really what caused me to get super close to God. And it's sad to say that it takes a rock bottom or your version of rock bottom to hit for you to get closer to God, but that's just what happened to me. And I feel like there's beauty in seeking Christ when you know you have nowhere else to go and knowing that he's always going to be there for you. So that's exactly what happened. My dad passed away in February. That summer was the worst summer I ever had. I tried to distract myself with jobs. I had 2 jobs. Oh my God, I hated it so much that I had 2 jobs, but I did to try to distract myself. I moved back home for the summer because I knew my mom wouldn't say it, but I knew she really wanted me to be there. But yeah, obviously the first holidays without them are the worst. Christmas still, it's only been 2 Christmases without him, but the second Christmas was just as bad as the first. I was just as emotional because for me, Christmas was the last time that I saw him alive. Not really a lot of excuses, but I was just away at college. So saw him in December and then he passed away in February. So, Christmas is always a hard time for me. But yeah, I went to therapy. The timing of it was like, oh, she's going to therapy because she needs grief counseling. Like, that's how my mom saw it. Like, oh, she just needs grief counseling. Like, mind you, I was already sad before my dad passed away. My dad passing away was just the cherry on top. It was just like, yeah, you're already going through it. Boom, dead dad. So that's really what happened because I was already going through like relationship problems. That was just the tip of the iceberg. To anyone who's lost a loved one, especially at a young age, you really just have to keep going because you have to seek comfort in knowing they would not want you to stop. They want to see you win. They want to see you achieve great things. And that's what really keeps me going, is knowing like my dad would be so proud of me. I mean, everyone says like, oh, he'd be proud of you, but like I know he would, because that's like the biggest thing he used to brag on with his children, is just all of our accomplishments. We were his biggest prize or bragging rights. The point that I'm trying to make here is really just to know that grief is a part of life. Losing someone at a young age, you could see it as a positive, as, it makes you more wise, it makes you more mature, and it essentially prepares you for life's obstacles early on, rather than someone losing someone at a later age. I've always said that this experience has matured me so much so quickly. Sometimes I do miss the old me, and I've even grieved the old me. The old Logan, goofy, kind-hearted, kind of died for a little bit, and I just wasn't myself. And I'm like just now starting to like feel like, okay, I'm like kind of back to normal. But yeah, like you got to keep going and you got to be happy. There's not a timeline on when you're going to heal from grief. You're never going to heal. It's always going to be a sad thing, but the wound gets less sensitive, and you just learn how to adjust and find literally the joys in life, find other reasons to live and to keep going. I hope this video helps someone out there. I just share it because I feel like people got a misconstrued perception of me, like, oh, she got it together because she's smiling and she's laughing, so she's over her dead dad. It's like, no, I'm never gonna be over it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a very sad thing, but I just carry it well. But I don't want people to think that if you see someone, see a friend or anyone lose a loved one, don't think like, oh, they'll be fine in a week. Like, like just check on them, send a text. Even if they lost someone a year ago, 2 years ago, it's still going to be sad. I know this was a very sad topic, but I think it's very necessary because a lot of people don't know how to deal with young people regarding death. It's my experience. Everyone's experience is different. But yeah, I'll see y'all next time.